story from Gloobnib. Metrics. You get what you measure. This is really long, but it represents my crowning professional achievement in the Malicious Compliance department. I felt it best to keep the story intact and include each step of escalating malicious compliance. TLDR at the bottom. Back in the early 90s, 1989, I worked for a very large telephone company as a customer support representative CSR in their billing call center. My first day after completing the required 2 weeks of training, I received 4 customer commendations. The customer had to call back after we were through, ask for a supervisor, and say that I deserved to be commended. I received a total of 12 commendations in my first week on the job. This was unheard of. Most CSRs got maybe 2 to 3 a month. Not bragging, just stating that I was good at the job, and at only 18 years old, I really liked getting the positive attention for doing my job well. So my 30-day evaluation rolls around, and my supervisor takes me aside, and the conversation goes something like this. I will be G, SV will be my supervisor. SV. Gloob, you've received over 20 customer commendations in your first month. That is outstanding. Your attendance is perfect. You have never been late coming back from your breaks. She then shows me a printout with several columns of numbers, metrics, but with one of mine circled in red. There's only one problem. You are spending too much time in work state. G. Okay. What is work state and why is that bad? SV. Work state is when you make yourself unavailable for calls. You are only supposed to use it for restroom breaks or when the customer terminates the call before you can complete your work. It says here you are averaging over 70 seconds of work state on every call. That number should never be any higher than 20 seconds. G. Oh, well, the reason why is that once I understand the customer's problem and we agree upon a solution, I thank the customer for calling and then make myself unavailable while I do all the computer work needed to fix their problem. SV. Well, see, we can't have your metrics so far outside the realm of what every other CSR does. Just keep the customer on the line while you do the updates so that this metric looks as good as your other metrics. G. That doesn't make any sense. The customers really appreciate that I am able to quickly understand their problems and am able to get them fixed quickly. You are asking me to take up more of their time when it isn't needed. SV. I know, sweetie, but please, I don't like having to explain to my boss why your metric is so outside the norm. G. Yeah, okay, I guess. For the next 30 days, I kept the customer on the line while I completed every aspect of the call. I would then thank the customer, hang up, and then place myself into work state, doing absolutely nothing but staring at the second hand of my watch for exactly 20 seconds. Then I would take the next call. Fast forward to my monthly review at 60 days. SV. Gloob, I see that your work state number is now 20 seconds, which is good. But see this number here? You can see that your average call time is now just over 310 seconds. We really don't want to see that number above 300 seconds. G. You told me not to let the customer hang up until I was finished doing the work. SSV. I know, but see if you can maybe work a little bit faster. It's only 10 seconds per call. I know you can do it. G. Yes, I will make sure that number is not more than 300 next month. SV. That's the spirit. For the next 30 days, I made sure that every single one of my calls took up exactly 5 minutes. As in, if the customer just needed to be transferred to another department, I would put them on hold for 4 minutes and 45 seconds, then come back on the line and say, transferring you now. I kept a stopwatch with a lap timer set up so that I would know exactly when my 5 minutes were up. Then I would go into work state for 20 seconds. Then I would take the next call. Time for the 90-day review. SV. Okay, I'm not sure what exactly is happening here, but I see your productivity is really starting to plummet, and we've noticed you haven't had a commendation in over a month. G. I'm not sure I understand. My work state and my average call handling time are both within the expected values. I can see that you track the number of calls each day as well. What is the expected range for that metric? SV gets a strange look on her face. Realization is dawning. We want to see everyone averaging at least 100 calls a day. G, but I'm averaging close 110. What is the problem? SV, in your first 2 months, you were taking over 130 calls a day. G, but I'm still within your expected metrics, correct? SV, yes, but we already know you can do better. G, okay, maybe I don't understand how this is calculated. Are all calls included in all metrics? SV, actually, no. If a call lasts under 15 seconds, we assume it is a transfer or escalation, and it doesn't get included in either your work state or average call times. But it is still included in the total calls metric. That's why it seems like we are asking you to take more calls in a day than is possible. The transfers don't take any time to complete, but still get included in your total calls. G. Okay, I will see what I can do to increase my total calls per day. So, for the next 30 days, same drill as last month. Every call takes me exactly 5 minutes to complete, followed by 20 seconds in work state. Only now, I kept a notepad next to me and kept tick marks for every call I handled. When I got to my expected 100 calls for the day, every single call that came in after that, I would immediately transfer to the supervisor escalation line, not even bothering to ask the customer for their phone number or why they were calling. The line was supposed to be reserved for irate customers or other issues that were beyond our authority to deal with. But unless I logged into the customer's accounts, the supervisors had no way to tell who escalated the call. I did this exactly 100 times each day at the end of my shift. When I got to 100 of these calls, I logged out of the ACD, call tracking system, and would go hide in the bathroom or break room for about 20 to 30 minutes until the end of my shift. At my next evaluation, day 120, it was my supervisor and the vice president for the entire call center, 3 levels up, who were at the table. They had the metrics sheets for each of the last 4 months spread out in front of them. They handed a copy to me. VP, S has informed me of the previous conversations you've had with her. She also informs me that every time you discussed a specific metric, the next month that metric would be exactly the minimum number required. Nothing more, nothing less. She also informed me that at your last meeting, you were requested to increase your average number of calls per day. G, that is correct. Did I not achieve the goal this month? VP, you exactly doubled the number of calls to 200 per day. Nobody has ever taken 200 calls in a day, let alone average that over a full month. In fact, I had the IT staff go back and pull the metrics for the last 2 months. Not only are your averages for each metric exactly the minimum acceptable value, every single day is exactly that value. That is simply not possible. I believe you have somehow hacked into our ACD system and have modified the tracking entries for yourself. S. Gloob, I'm honestly not sure this is going to work out. Aren't you happy? G. Honestly? Not really, since we started focusing on metrics. Sorry, this is too long already. I'll leave out the drama over the ACD vendor, Rockwell Collins, having to fly someone in to try to find out how I was hacking their system to do this, in the popular culture sense of the word. Their threats of termination, the ultimate involvement of our union steward, or the final screw you I left behind on my last day. On second thought, that deserves its own post. The mods deleted my follow-up in this sub, so repost it over to R Petty Revenge. That story is located here. Anyway, I lasted about 4 weeks after that. Just enough time for me to start looking for another job, and for me to give my 2 weeks' notice once I found it. I've matured significantly since I had this job. Honestly, I now feel bad for just about everyone, including the customers that I undoubtedly pissed off there at the end. But I never forgot a very important business lesson that I still use when managing employees today. You get what you measure. But are you measuring the right things? TL. DR. As a telephone CSR, I went from being the rookie all-star that the customers loved to a jaded malicious compliance asshole in 4 short months. All because of a misguided focus on BS metrics and not on the most important metric of customer satisfaction. The malicious compliance in was executed flawlessly. By adhering strictly to the ridiculous metrics, OP exposed the absurdity of focusing on arbitrary numbers over actual customer satisfaction. The calculated, exact execution of every task made a strong statement. Perfectly executed. Story from Graveyard Pixie. No vacation. PTO until October. Okay, I'm taking all of October off. Something happened at my husband's work last night that reminded me of this decade-old story. For context, at the time, my husband worked overnights at one of the largest supermarket operators in North America. I was about 6 months pregnant, and the store he worked in had a change in who the store manager was, and when I went shopping, I used either a wheelchair or a scooter with a cart on it due to a disability that makes it difficult for me to walk under normal circumstances. Background: originally, we had felt pretty lucky that between all the pregnancy tests I had done to confirm that yes, I am in fact pregnant, and the ultrasound, the earliest and the latest due date we had been given, all fell in the first week of September. So my husband had planned to use one of his weeks of vacation that week and then use his paternity leave after that week so he would be able to be there while I was at the hospital in recovery and for the first days of our baby's life. His boss seemed genuinely confused by the request. He was 22, single, and called his truck his baby, but had said something along the lines of, "Hey man, it's your vacation, you should use it how you want to." Then, about a week later, I came home from one of my doctor appointments to a message on the answering machine saying, "Unfortunately, I have to deny your request for vacation and paternity leave in September as someone with more seniority has put in for those days off as well. I hope this doesn't cause problems between you and your wife." I burst into tears on the spot, but my husband said he'd go talk to the person who requested those days off, explain that he asked for that time off because it's when the baby is due, and see if he could offer them something to give him those days off instead. Unfortunately, it was one of his co-workers who was going to have major surgery and needed that time off to recover. So we couldn't ask him to trade vacation weeks for us. My husband put in for time off for the second week off in September and is denied. Then he tries the third week and is denied again. But this time, his boss tells him that he won't be able to use any of his vacation time until October due to his position and who has time off. Cue the malicious compliance. We realized that because this boss was new, he probably didn't realize that my husband had been saving all his vacation days, PTO, and paternity leave. When we added up all the time, it amounted to 3 weeks of time off. And if we worked it around to start around when his days off were, he would be able to be home with the baby from October 1st until November 9th. His co-workers on the night crew and several of his friends on the morning crew felt that he had been seriously shafted by the new boss, so they got in on this plan with us. We waited until the boss's day off, and that's when my husband put in the schedule for the time off he was requesting, which was approved by the scheduling manager and the night crew manager. This was in July, so the only thing left to do was wait. Our baby was born in the early hours of the morning, about 2 days before our earliest due date after 29 hours of stage 2 and 3 labours. I ended up having an induction due to the fact I had been in early stage labour since the beginning of August, and it just wasn't progressing. When my husband called the night shift manager to say that I was going to the hospital to give birth, he told my husband to call in if he was going to miss any more days of work, and they would make sure it got covered. It wasn't PTO, but it was considered an excused absence. After I came home from the hospital, my mom started staying overnight with us temporarily to help out preparing meals, taking care of the dog and the household chores so I could focus on taking care of myself and the baby. That first month home was pretty rough, so I was relieved when October rolled around and I finally had his help 24/7 and my mom was able to take a break. The aftermath, first up, was the 3 days of paternity leave. On the morning of the 5th day of this 40-day-long vacation, the boss woke me up at 6 a.m. wanting to talk to my husband. I told him he was feeding the baby and asked why he was calling. He said he was checking in to see why my husband no call, no-showed the night before, and I said, sarcastically, "Oh no, that's terrible. I'll go get him for you." I put the phone on speaker so my husband can talk to his boss while he's feeding the baby, so I get to hear everything. The boss very smugly informed my husband that his paternity leave was over, and since he didn't come in the night before, he would be written up for a no-call, no-show. My husband said, "Yes, I know my paternity leave is over, but my first vacation week started last night." The boss: "First vacation week?" Husband: "Yeah, I have 3. I was going to use one in September, one in October, and one in November. But since you told me I couldn't use any PTO until October, I decided to just take all of October off to be with my wife and newborn." The boss: "I'll call you back after I look into this." I don't know how I managed to stay silent and not laugh at this conversation, but somehow I did. We got a call back later that day that went something like this. Boss: "Yeah, I'm going to need you to come into work tonight. I never would have approved your request for time off if I knew you were taking the whole month off." Husband: "You didn't approve it. The night manager and scheduling manager both approved this, so I'm not coming in tonight." Boss, clearly thinking this is a gotcha moment: "I didn't approve it, and I need you to come in tonight. So you'll be here at 10 on your regular schedule for the rest of the month, or you'll be written up." Husband: "No, I won't. I submitted the request in July and you never denied my request. It's been approved by the other managers and it's already started, so it's too late for you to deny it now." Boss: "I'll call you back." After that, my husband called the union steward to confirm that he was in the clear, and they say that he is. We got another call the following Sunday, which was my husband's next day off, asking if he would be coming in that night since he wasn't listed as being on vacation in the system. Husband: "Am I on the schedule?" Boss: "No." Husband: "Then it's my night off, so no." He hung up after that, but we got a call like that every night. My husband wasn't on the schedule due to it being one of his regular days off and him not being marked as being on vacation in the system. Some of the ladies in the bakery deli section of the store put together a card shower for us and gave them gift cards since we never said anything to them about when my baby shower was or where we were registered. Oops. Later that week, I made a trip into the store one afternoon to pick up some stuff and introduce them to the baby, and my mum came along too. While we were over there, the store manager came up and said, "You must be husband's wife." I was feeling petty, so I pointed out that we would have met sooner if he didn't have a habit of running away and hiding in his office when customers approached him. I don't know if that irritated him or if he was planning on saying this next anyway, but the next words out of his mouth were, "You don't look like you need help with the baby. Husband said he was taking time off to help you with the baby because you have a disability, but I guess you don't need it, huh?" The bakery deli ladies glared at him, and my mom went pale because she knows I usually react very strongly to those comments. But my mom also raised me to be civil and mannerly, so I just smiled and said, "I hope you don't speak to your employees like that. That can get you fired. Bless your heart." And one of his employees told him I was right, so he sulked off. He seemed so desperate to find any reason he could to force my husband to come back to work before the end of the month. I started wondering if he was being petty and might try to retaliate after my husband came back to work, or if he was just desperate. So I called one of my husband's co-workers. Remember when I said new boss was 22? Well, he also had a habit of bragging about how he started working for the company as a cashier when he was 17 and worked his way up to management in just 5 years. At some point after the baby was born, District came and did a walkthrough, and it turned out his dad was the district manager, and he didn't work his way up to management. He was a nepo baby. That burned bridges with more than a few employees. Then he turned up in a brand new truck and said, with the year-end bonus he was going to get, he could pay it off in one go. Several employees walked, including 2 on the night crew. Since my husband was on paternity leave, he had to work overnights to make up the slack. He'd never showed up to cover overnights when they were shorthanded before that, so we figured he was desperate to get my husband to come back because working overnights was cutting into his dating time. Finally, the end of my husband's vacation time came, and his boss called again. "Boss, you used up your paternity leave and your vacation weeks. You're coming in tonight, right?" Husband: "No, I still have PTO days left this year, and since I won't be able to use them all between November and the end of December, and they don't roll over into next year, I decided to take them now." Boss: "Well, when are you coming back to work?" Husband: "November 10th. Boss called back the next day to tell my husband that actually he had used up his paternity leave while he was at the hospital giving birth, so he would have to use PTO to cover that, and actually he had used a week of PTO when he took me to the hospital with fake labour. So actually, he would be coming back to work on November 1st. My husband called the union steward and filed a complaint that his boss was retroactively deciding what counted as paternity leave and what counted as PTO, and trying to force him to use PTO days to cover days where he either went in late or left for a couple hours and then came back and stayed late to make up the missed hours. He went in to fill out some paperwork, and we didn't hear from his boss again between then and when he got replaced at the end of the following January. Edit. To clarify some questions in the comments regarding FMLA, we didn't use it. This was us cashing in my entire husband's vacation he had for the year, as well as PTO days. We think in total it was 29 days. Plus 3 days paternity leave we stretched to 40 by only applying for time off on the days he was actually scheduled to work. At the time, the company only offered 3 days paid paternity leave. I don't recall how much they offered unpaid, or the total amount though, so we decided to just use the paid days since my parents were close by. As for why we put up with the calls coming in for so long, simply put, we were both exhausted, and as much as we wanted him to stop calling period, we didn't want to offend him since neither of us knew how long he'd be there. We had expected him to be gone in 3 months, like most of the other rotating cast of store management had been, so when he stayed longer than that, we decided it was just easier to just deal with him long enough to enforce a boundary. It was a perfect revenge, and it was executed flawlessly. By following the boss's rigid rules to the letter, OP's husband ensured he got all his leave while exposing the boss's incompetence. The panic and struggle that followed made the revenge even sweeter. Story from slice_of_pie. No, you don't understand. I really wouldn't do that if I were you. TL. Doctor. Employee is certain she knows better is wrong, and FAFO. Warning. Pretty long. Sorry. As I talked about the last time I posted in here, I work in a union shop, and I've been a shop steward for most of my 25-plus year career. In that time, I've seen some both figurative and literal, and every single time I've ever been unwary enough about how fate works to utter the words, "Now I've seen everything," the universe will inevitably hand me its beer and say, "Watch this." Stewards, despite the general perception of us, aren't there to defend employees who are accused of misconduct. We're there to defend the collective bargaining agreement, meaning if you've well and truly yourself and your future with the agency we both work for, my role is primarily helping you determine which of your options for leaving you're going to exercise. I've been at this rodeo for a long time, and management and I generally have a pretty good understanding of how things are going to go. Enter Jackie. Jackie was one of those unbelievably toxic peaked-in-high school cheerleader types with just enough understanding of what our employer does, how it's required to behave within federal guidelines, and what its obligations are when you utter certain mystical phrases like, "I need an accommodation," or discrimination based on a protected class. To be clear, those things are not just law. They're also morally right to be concerned about. And so, my employer actually bends over backwards and does backflips to be certain that they're going above and beyond the minimum. Jackie was not a minority in any sense. She was female, but in a workplace that's 80% female, that doesn't quite count. She may well have been disabled, but that was undiagnosed, I think, and I'm inclined to think her claims of it, much like most of the rest of the things she said, were complete fabrications. The point at which I got involved was at the tail end of over a year's worth of actions by Jackie, in which it rapidly became apparent that her manager was, in fact, an excellent candidate for canonization. I got referred to her when one of my other union friends contacted me and said, "Hey, Jackie so-and-so just got put on administrative leave, and it's total BS, can you help?" I get referrals like this a lot, both because I've been around forever and because I have a pretty good track record for ensuring that people accused of they haven't actually done get treated fairly. So nothing stuck out to me as odd. I contacted her, and she had absolutely no idea why management would put her on admin leave without any warning and confiscate all of her agency-issued devices, access, and instruct her that she was not to have any contact at all with anyone she worked with during work hours. This immediately sent up a whole host of red flags. For one thing, I know the senior HR guy, that is the HR analyst's boss who's involved, having been down the road of difficult situation, but this is what we can do negotiation with him many, many times over the years. I don't always agree with him, but he's fair, and usually we can come to some sort of middle ground. At any rate, he would never suspend someone out of the blue without a really, really good reason. She knows what she's done. She has to. So I gave her my usual spiel of things to do and things you should not do. Don't tell me, or our employer, things that aren't true, especially if you think it'll make you look bad if you don't. Don't talk to your coworkers. Don't talk to your friends about this, particularly because you live in a town of under 2,000 people. Everyone knows everything about everyone else. Do not talk with management or HR without me present, period. When they do start asking questions, keep answers simple, to the point, short, and do not give lengthy explanations. Tell them what they want to know, and otherwise, shut the f***. I've been here and done this many times. I know this process very well. I can't tell you what they're going to do, but I can tell you what I think they're going to do, and I'm usually either right or pretty close to being right. I have been surprised. Nearly 3 weeks went by of radio silence from the agency, other than a bland sort of, "We want to talk with Jackie about utilization of work assignments, tasks, and equipment." Email that tells you almost nothing while still being literally true. Finally, it was go time for a meeting. And I did something I haven't done in a really long time. I physically drove to Jackie's worksite instead of attending virtually over an hour and a half each way. What the hell? The weather was nice. We met ahead of going in, and I asked her if she remembered the rules I gave her at the beginning. She said she did. I asked her if she'd been following them, and she said she'd been very careful to. Swell. In we go. During the meeting, it was almost immediately obvious to me from the questions they started asking that Jackie was in serious, serious not like written warning or pay reduction. No, they were going to go for termination. And she was probably going to be very lucky if they decided not to refer it to the DA for criminal prosecution. An abbreviated summary of just the high points. Jackie had hundreds of confidential documents and electronic files in her personal possession, many of which fall squarely under HIPAA. She had emailed these out of the government system to one of the 4 or 5 personal email addresses she maintains. Her explanation for this was questionable. Jackie had logged overtime without permission. A lot. And on one memorable date, when she was vacationing in Europe with her family at the time, she said she'd called in to attend a meeting, but didn't have an answer why that meeting had apparently been 11.5 hours long and nobody remembered her attending by phone. Jackie had audio recordings of disabled and elderly people with whom she was working that she had taken without their consent or knowledge. A lot of them. Jackie's overall work product and system activity reliably showed that she was logging in at the start of her day, from home, and she worked some in the afternoon. But there were hours and hours of time when her computer was idle. She explained this as participating in union activity, which I knew was BS, because Jackie is not a steward. Jackie has no idea what the collective bargaining agreement actually says about much of anything beyond stewards can do whatever they want and management can't say, which is uninformed, shall we say. At any rate, steward activity must be recorded and time-coded as such. Jackie has never attended steward training and so didn't know this. Apparently nobody ever told her that. There's more. There's so much more. But in the interests of brevity, I will summarize the next 4 months of my dealing with this woman by pointing back to the cardinal rules I gave her and simply say, she broke every single one of them. A lot. When it finally got to the dismissal hearing that comes before the "You're fired" GTFO letter, she told me going in that she wanted to run things because she had some stuff she wanted to cover that she thought I probably wouldn't be A, comfortable doing, true because it was irrelevant, B, didn't know much about, again, true because she'd invented details, story, and witnesses as participants, and C, she felt like I wasn't really on her side in this to begin with. Not quite true. She was a member, so my job is representation here. Me? I really don't think that's a good idea. I've done a lot of these. You should let me handle it. Jackie. No. I know what I'm doing, and I talked with my attorney about this a lot. You can't stop me. Me. You're right. I can't. But this isn't going to go the way you think it will. Jackie. I know I'm right. They can't do this to me. Me. This isn't a good idea, but okay. It's your show. In we went and sat down. The senior HR guy I mentioned earlier was there, and he gave me a funny look when I sat back, laptop closed, and said nothing. Dismissal meetings are actually our meeting, and we get to run them from start to finish. They're there to listen. She started talking, and I have to give them credit. They took notes, listened to the things she said, and kept straight faces the entire time. It went exactly as I figured it would. Just the things they'd asked her about in the first of the several meetings I attended with Jackie had covered terminable offences on at least 4 or 5 different subjects, independent of one another. At the end, when she finally wound down, they all turned to me, Jackie included, and asked if I had anything I wanted to cover or that I thought may have been missed. Nope, I said. I think she covered everything already. I don't have anything to add. That afternoon, I got the union copy of her dismissal notice. Generally, they are open to at least discussing the option of the worker resigning and giving them a neutral reference going forward, but that wasn't in the cards. The last I had heard of Jackie, the Department of Justice was involved with her and her husband, and I'm reasonably confident that it didn't go well for her either. I do know that she will never work for the government again, as the letter was pretty. Explicit about what information they would release to any government agency asking for a reference. So it goes, they followed the collective bargaining agreement, terminating her with ample just cause. It was really a perfect case of malicious compliance. OP took a very good decision to not represent the oversmart Jackie, which led Jackie to getting herself fired. Story from Alex Wack. I'll make the quesadillas exactly as ordered, but you pay the dry cleaners. Obligatory disclaimer. On mobile, non-English speaker. Due to a previous post, I thought I write everything in my language and pass through Google Translation and the post it, but I may lose my reservation in hell. Still on hubby's account, an autocorrect error and my son's hungry stomach reminded me of my first conscious MC. It also kept away from Mexican food until I remit my husband. Back in the beginning of the 21st century, I was working in a cafe/sandwich shop. It was a 24/7 shop in a prime location, in an area with a lot of uni students and very active nightlife, and the road was a major artery for anyone travelling in or out of the city. When I started, as a first-year uni student trying to make some money, the shop was one of 4 of a small chain. Gary, the owner-manager, has bought the rights from the original shop. Gary was also doing quality control for the shop, because at that point, every shop had separate vendors. Fast forward 2 years. The original owners decide to incorporate, because they have a lot of offers for franchising and a couple of problems with quality control have appeared. So they bought back all the shops and instituted a more centralized approach to vendors. That was good for Gary, because he was the owner of the building, so he basically became a salaried manager and got extra income from the rent. Initially, nothing changed. We were still number 2 in sales. Product was good. Then Dick entered the picture. Dick was the new regional manager. The small chain had become big enough to reach national level, and the person responsible for quality control. He was considered something of a golden boy, having a business degree and helping with the expansion. The problem came from his ego. You see, Dick had done a cooking workshop that provides a certificate but nothing more, and considered himself something of a chef. His first major change was installing a crepe station. Not restaurant quality crepes, but crepes on the go, folded like a triangle. That is important for later. While a bitch to learn at the beginning, it quickly became one of our best sellers. We usually went over 10 litres of crepe mixture on a slow day. Having success with his first change, Dick decided to apply his chef training and implement some new things. At that point in time, Mexican cuisine was becoming popular in my country, due mostly to cooking shows. Dick decides to ride the trend and starts putting Mexican options on the menu. In reality, that meant 2 more set sandwiches and crepes, the ones on the board, and a few more customization options for sandwiches and crepes. And here begins the problem. As I said, Mexican cuisine was quite the new thing. Our country's cuisine is way different than the Mexican, especially on the spice level. A lot of the produce used for Mexican food was either rare or non-existent. But Dick was adamant it was another win for him found a vendor. And the quality started to fail. We started to receive buckets of pre-made chili and queso, and jars of picked jalapenos, and pre-made guacamole, and pico de gallo dips. Also, blocks of white cheese labeled queso blanco. The queso was an orange paste with some red bits in it. According to hubby, under a bad light it could pass for bad queso. And the left, a very plastic taste. It reminded of clay. One taste of that kept me away from Mexican food for a while. The jalapenos weren't jalapenos. They were pickled Thai green chilies, labeled as jalapenos, meaning they were way hotter than expected. I've never tasted the rest, but some adventurous customers that tried them weren't impressed. The only new thing that kind of sold was a plate of nachos, basically because it was Doritos covered in queso. When it was heated, it became an orange liquid, a lot of bacon and a lot of sausage. We have complained about the quality to Gary, but he couldn't do anything anymore, and Dick doesn't back down. Dick is a bit upset from the low sales. He blames us, you're not pushing them enough, and the customers. Those barbarians couldn't recognize a filet mignon from a shank. But he sticks to his guns, and then brings corporate to the shop. Dick comes in with 4 people from HQ. 2 of them are the owners. They sit and Dick comes and place an order of 5 quesadillas. It's a self-service shop. I ask how he wants them. Exactly as it says on the board and prepared exactly as I told you, he replies. Okay, sir. I will call you when they're ready, I replied, smiling. Now Dick, in all his chefy wisdom, has given us very specific instructions for the quesadillas. First, to take out of the way, it wasn't a proper quesadilla, it was a crepe. The instructions were, reheat the chili, start the crepe. Place 1.5 ladles of reheated queso. Add 1 ladle of the chili, add a tablespoon of chopped jalapenos, 1 tablespoon of queso blanco, half a tablespoon of guacamole, and fold. Doing that produced a liquid mess, which tried really hard to escape from a thin crepe. We usually reheated the queso only for nachos. Especially in a crepe, we put it cold and let it reheat with the plate's heat to avoid the aforementioned mess. Cue Malicious Compliance. We, me and the other girl working, make 5 quesadillas exactly as instructed. I took the order to the table, it was corporate after all, and waited for the results. 5 people, wearing white shirts and suits, bite into the quesadillas. The quesadillas almost simultaneously explode, raining melted cheese and red chili on them. Some of them have bitten a jalapeno, and the heat is hitting them hard. A few choice words were heard. We brought them 2 bottles of water for the heat and 2 full packs of napkins to clean what they could. Let's say the new menu wasn't a blast with HQ. After they left, Dick came back. He was beyond angry. He approached the bench, bypassing the line, it was during one of our rush hours, and made a scene. The following dialogue is a bit censored. "You stupid bitch. You made me look bad because you don't like Mexican food. You can't even follow basic instructions. The cleaning of your mess will be deducted from your pay. And some other more offensive stuff. I was standing there dumbfounded, along with a long line of customers hearing his outburst. And then Gary intervened. "Shut the f-" "What the f did you say?" Dick replied. I said, "Shut the f." The girls followed your instructions to the letter. Don't try to blame them for your mistake, or make them pay for your dry cleaning. Dick, I can do what the f I want. And when I'm finished with them, maybe I'll find another manager for this shop. Gary, I would love to see you try. Dick, oh, I will. I will. And he stormed out. Fallout. Immediately, Gary called HQ and notified about what happened. He also gave an ultimatum. If something happened to his staff, the company would need to find a new location. 3 days later, we were notified that Dick was fired. While his outburst was the main reason, one of the owners having a really bad reaction to the jalapenos. A week later, the Mexican menu was removed. During that part, they found out that Dick had used the cheapest vendor for the new menu. The vendor had a reputation for shady practices, which partly explained the weird products. I stayed there until I finished uni and got a job in my field. The Mexican menu made a huge comeback 2 years before I left. This time, HQ had hired a proper chef to consult and find vendors. Now the ingredients are as authentic as possible, and pico and guac are made daily in-house. They also have good queso now, although it took me a long time to try it. And no pre-packaged, pre-made chili. In fact, no chili at all. My repulsion to Mexican food ended when my husband took me to a proper Mexican restaurant and finally tested a proper Mexican meal. Edit? Well, this escalated quickly. Thank you all for the awards and you, a anonymous Redditor, for the gold. I've been in the comments and need to address to things. 1. I didn't put it through Google Translate. 2. When I say chili, I mean chili con carne. Although, with some of the knowledge I have now, I would characterize it as a bad sloppy Joe meat mix with delusions of grandeur. The malicious compliance was perfectly executed. Following Dick's exact instructions exposed his terrible recipe, embarrassing him in front of HQ. The exploding quesadillas highlighted his incompetence, leading to his firing and the removal of the disastrous Mexican menu. Story from Young Discord. You want me to shut up? Okay, your loss, I'll shut up. TL. DR. Toxic kinda GF kept telling me how I hurt her with the things I say, implying I shouldn't say them. I cut all contact with her and stopped talking to her. Okay, so first off, this is sort of malicious compliance. Although she never directly told me not to talk to her, she did constantly complain that the things I said hurt her. Out of context, this makes me look like a bad guy, but I promise I will explain everything. Also, this can also be sort of considered as a revenge story if you really want to push it. Okay, so backstory, I am in my mid-20s, and until recently, I had never been in a relationship. Girls didn't really notice me. I'm a guy, in case anyone is wondering. And to be honest, I never really felt this urge to find someone right away. So this girl shows up in my life, let's call her E for obvious reasons. Now for a good few years, me and E were just casual distant friends. I met her when she was one of my friend's girlfriend. The relationship did not last long. Not, just to be clear, back then. And for a good while after their relationship ended, I was not interested in her in any way. I don't make advances on people who are in relationships, much less on my friends' partners. In fact, I don't even consider them as a potential love interest. Anyway, a few years pass, and somehow we end up catching up on FB. Somehow we managed to sort of hit it off. She is cute and seems interested in me, and I felt some sort of connection with her, so I figured maybe she might be the one. I was concerned that she was my friend's ex, and they did not end on good terms, so I didn't want to start anything with her officially until I knew for certain that she was going to be the one and that it was going to be serious. Boy, is I glad I was careful, because I dodged a huge bullet. For like 3 months or so, we were in this weird state of being interested in each other. But for now, not committing to anything. During this time, she sucked me in, and by that, I mean sucked me in the way narcissistic, egocentric people do. And this girl's tactic was to play the victim. She would spend hours upon hours talking about this bad thing and that bad thing, and how her first BF, who she depicted as mistreating her in the same way she was mistreating me, traumatized her, how my friend traumatized her, etc. And this goes on for 3 months. I eventually start to notice a few things about her, and those are: 1. Whenever she would strike a conversation, the focus was on her. All of the time. Sometimes she pretended to ask me a question, but then brushed off the answer quickly and moved on to talking about her and her horrible things in life. 2. Naturally being interested in her, I wanted to know more about her, so I would ask stuff about her to get to know her better. But when I did, she put up a wall, stating that she is scared of being hurt again. So at some point, I just wouldn't ask those questions since she is unwilling to tell me anything deep or meaningful about her. I'm only complying with what she's telling me. If it bothers her, then I won't do it, right? 3. She would eventually complain to me and cry and make a scene because I didn't seem interested in her since I didn't ask questions about her to get to know her better. See the previous point for irony. And when I explained why, and that I saw that asking personal things bothered her, so I didn't want to hurt her or make her feel uneasy, she would just not have it and blame me for being insensitive, etc. Cue a 4-hour cry session where I try to calm her down. 4. Didn't ask anything about me, as if she weren't interested in me at all, but rather just wanted me to be someone who gave her constant attention. We are talking double-digit hours glued to the chat screen here, no joke. And if I mentioned it, I was the bad guy. Cue crying, playing the victim, etc. 5. Would ask me stuff, but then would berate me for giving my opinion or giving her advice on stuff. I guess she just wanted me to stay shut and just silently listen to her hours on end. 6. Whenever I tried helping her with her many issues by trying to lift her spirits or even just giving her advice, she would get defensive and then just say that I don't understand, completely dismissing the possibility that maybe the reason why I said the things I said was because I do understand, and that she is the one who doesn't understand. She was very closed-minded whilst berating me for being too closed-minded, which was funny because of my next point. 7. She would constantly tell me what I am doing wrong. I don't think I ever heard a single compliment come from her. I know she has a lot of issues, but so do I. As a result of my low self-esteem, I generally tend to try and think, what can I do better? Maybe I should improve on something and I'm just not seeing it yet. And they have a point, etc. So whenever she criticized me for something I did, I would genuinely reflect on said thing and try to adapt or change it. And I changed a lot of things to cater to her personal needs. After all, if you are in a relationship, you need to adapt to the other person a bit, right? Right? Of course, back then, I had little experience in relationships, so I didn't really know the right way to do things. I would constantly try new things that I never did that she liked to do. After all, we can't do just the things I like, and we need to meet halfway. Except that we only did things she liked but didn't do any things I liked that she never did or liked. As you can see, it all seems very clearly toxic, though from up close back int, day when it happened, it was harder to see. Hence why I dodged the bullet. She cost me a lot of time and drama, but eventually things ended. Her, of course, being the one who ended whatever it was that we had, because she was too scared of being hurt again. Great tactic, sweetie. Shoot yourself in the foot because you are afraid someone might shoot it instead. I cried pretty hard that day, but I am a proactive person, and I know that crying won't get you anywhere in life. If you want things to be better, you need to actually do something. As much as it will break your heart to do it, you need to do stuff. Now let's roll back to the last week of our thing that we had. Now she criticized me for not talking to people enough and not keeping in touch with them. Some with the attitude that I have, as I mentioned earlier, in one of the points. I began to think and came to the conclusion that she is right. So I made an effort to talk to a few people on FB, with whom I stopped talking for years. I randomly picked a few people, one of them being a girl called Jay. Now, E was really draining me emotionally during the last week. Trust me, hours and hours on end of being the shoulder to cry on for a few months will drain you faster than a coffee enema. And I really needed someone to help me out emotionally. Enter Jay. We hit it off. She seemed like an awesome person. Funny thing is, we didn't talk for 8 years, so she was basically a new person. She was funny, she was witty, the works. She was the highlight of my day whenever I talked to her. I realized that I really liked her. But of course, I was not going to make any advancements on her, because I was already in this semi-committed thing with E. And as much as E seemed to be toxic, I felt it wouldn't be right if I wouldn't at least try to make things work with E first as a last try until I end things with her and decide to move on. I am a loyal and fair person. I do not cheat or even look for someone else whilst with someone else. Alas, the heavens must have heard me because E decided to make things easy and end things herself. So now, let's resume me crying for about an hour. Didn't last long. The sadness was strong, but it ended rapidly because I felt this coming for a while now, and Jay showed up too near the end. So me and E decide to end up as friends. Oh, you thought the story ends here? Much mistaken. Which we do. Now, here is what happened over the following week after the breakup. I honestly don't know what to call it. I instantly hit it off with Jay and comes out. She was also interested in me. Comes out that she was in a very hard spot in her life, just when I happened to contact her, and unknowingly, I happened to really help her emotionally in a way no one else could. So I tell E the news. After all, we are friends, and I want her to know that her friend, me, is doing fine, and not to feel about ending things. She would often say things like, I feel like a bad guy now, to play the victim for doing something shitty. Seeing how at the time she seemed to act just fine. No dramas, etc. She seemed to have gotten over me pretty quickly and doing well. I thought we could just have a friendly chat, but nope. Enter the drama lord, bursts into tears, making me into some sort of monster by rubbing it in, that I found someone else while she is getting over it, etc. She then threw a tantrum and didn't talk to me for a while. This goes on for about a week. I try to talk to her like a friend and just be normal about stuff. I even helped be a wingman for her to get the attention of this guy she was into, which not long after telling me about him, revealed to me that she was already into him while we were still in our relationship. Frankly, that is okay. I understand. I was in the same situation, so I understand. If she wasn't hitting on him, it's okay. The heart wants what the heart wants. I won't criticize her for it. She played fair and everything was okay. Or at least it would be if she wouldn't have been giving me for the same thing. Hypocrisy comes to mind. Anyway, I let it slide, whatever. She is my friend. I want her to be happy, so I help her out. Cue a week of her freaking out over every little thing this guy does or doesn't do, and I am the one listening to it all. And soon, I notice that I am back to square one, where I am constantly being sucked into her little world of drama and insecurities. This time, however, I tell her to stop because this time, I have someone else. And if E were my partner, then I would be willing to spend so much time on her. But now, she is just my friend. And I have priorities. She can't be in the center of my life anymore. Cue her flipping out on me. Because of course she would flip out on me, screaming, accusing me of hurting her. Why do I do this, etc., and that she won't ever talk to me again. 2 days later, she talks to me as if nothing had happened and proceeds to tell me what I did wrong. At this point, I am close to my limit. I am a patient person when it comes to people, but enough is enough. So, as a friend, I try to give her some advice about the way she behaves, of course, in a friendly, most PC way possible. Of course, E takes it as an attack on her and proceeds to do her famous victim squeal, making me into Satan incarnate for daring, for criticizing her, because she is just too scared to address and deal with her issues and insecurities. Oh, hell no. That was the final straw. I tried everything, from listening to giving advice, even a bit of tough love on one occasion and nothing, and she was like a brick wall, expecting help but not willing to actually do anything. So I unleashed the truck of truth on her, and I did not. Hold. Back. I tell her how essentially that she can blame it on someone else, only so many times until she has to admit that maybe she is the reason why things mess up in her life. I told her how she was in, what, 3 relationships? Yeah, I know I counted us as one of them. And in each and every single one, she was the victim. Yeah, no, once, it happens. Twice. Okay, unusual coincidence, but by the third time, she should be noticing that there is a pattern. And I basically told her that if she doesn't stop acting the way she does, she will never be in a relationship. That she will fail the relationship with the guy she currently likes, just like she failed the relationship with Guy A, my friend, and me. I then proceeded to tell her that I know what she will do now that she will cry, play the victim, throw a tantrum, and not talk to me for a few days, and that she can do that all she wants, but it won't change or fix anything until she actually starts addressing her own fears, issues, and insecurities. The last thing I wrote to her was that since I am such a bad guy and hurt her so much because I keep saying the wrong stuff, then I will just make things easy, do what she wants me to do, shut up, and just not talk to her. Told her not to bother replying to what I said because I am not going to read or reply to it since I know what it was going to be. Cue her doing exactly what I said she would do. When she realized that I didn't reply to her first comment, she of course sent another one, but again, I just didn't bother. Some of you may think, how is this malicious compliance exactly? Well, she kept saying that I say things I shouldn't say, etc., so I just complied and stopped talking to her altogether. In fact, I cut all contact with her. Why would this hurt her? Well, because she is the sort of person that needs to latch onto others to keep her drama going. If there is nobody left to blame, or nobody to listen to her drama, she has to admit that she needs to do something about her life, and of course, she is too scared to do that, so she prefers to leech onto others who pat her on her head and say, there, it's all good. And now she has one less person to latch onto. As much as it might have hurt her, I did this in good faith. She needs to reach rock bottom until she finally realizes these things and gets her together. I only helped that happen. As for me, I got together with Jay, moved in with her, got a job, a house, and we have been together for almost a year now, and things are only getting better and better. Comes out that the person you think is the right one isn't always the one who is actually the right person for you. So for that, I am thankful to E for showing me the exact kind of person I was supposed to look for, who I surprisingly found right after her. And this is where the revenge part comes in if she stalks my FB page or asks our common friends how I am doing. I am doing very well. And funnily enough, at the time when me and E met, we, whether in very similar circumstances, same issues and insecurities, etc., so maybe if she sees me get my life together, she might realize that I was onto something. When I told her those things, because I did those things and it really helped me in life. E, I hope you got your shit together. I mean it. Procurement wants to play dumb? Sure thing. Indeed, OP's decision was the best. E expected endless emotional support while offering none, then demanded exclusivity while moving on herself. By cutting her off entirely and refusing to entertain her drama, I delivered the perfect, karma-filled consequence. Her own tactics turned against her. Next story from Tapioca, fumble. Work on this music, knowing there will be many problems down the road? Okay. First time posting here and on Reddit, so I apologize if I'm not organizing this as thoroughly as all the awesome posts here. I am an audio engineer. Around 5 years ago, I was working at a very high-end facility with some amazing equipment. The studio looked beautiful. It was quite amazing. Most of my time at the studio was spent recording musical artists and mixing their tracks. I was booked for an 8-hour block to mix some pre-recorded tracks that a producer was going to bring in. To clarify, mixing a song means taking all the individual instrument recordings and balancing volumes and applying effects. After a song is mixed, it's sent to a mastering engineer who puts the final touches on it and makes it ready for distribution. In most cases, especially if it's through a record label, the mixing engineer and mastering engineer are two different people, since they're two different art forms that utilize different technologies. I like to research my clients before they come in, so I did some poking around on the internet and found out very quickly that the producer coming into the studio is a very accomplished producer who has worked with some amazing artists. I was thrilled I hadn't worked with a producer of this caliber before. We'll call him the producer. I made sure to get as much information as possible from the studio manager so that I could come into the session well prepared. My manager forwarded me an email from the producer that said they were just mixing a few songs. I asked if I was getting an assistant engineer to help. My manager told me that they actually requested that I don't have an assistant. That was a first, but I shrugged it off. I got to the studio early and prepped for as much as I possibly could. The producer and the band that he recorded arrived, so I started getting files and such from them to start mixing. As I'm doing this, I started to see a lot of red flags. The producer brought in 10 songs that he needed mixed and mastered today. Typically, I'll mix 2 songs in 10 hours, maybe 3 if I'm hauling and not taking ear breaks and such. Furthermore, he wanted it to be mixed on our large recording console, the giant desk with all the buttons and faders and such, essentially bypassing the computer. I let him know the following. 1. Mixing 10 songs in 8 hours is going to be very difficult, and that I'll have to sacrifice quality moving that quickly, and that I'll do my best to mix the songs all in one day. 2. I'm not a mastering engineer, but I have experience mastering and can give him some masters that will suffice. I'll provide files they can send to other mastering engineers as well. 3. Mixing on a console instead of a computer means that it will be way more time-consuming since I would be turning physical knobs, pushing physical buttons, and connecting gear with cables, and keeping track of all of this. It also means that if they want any edits or changes after today, they'll need to book the studio for at least 2 to 3 additional hours so that I can set everything up again exactly how it was. I figured that since the producer had worked with such amazing artists before, all of this would make sense to him. I got the impression that he either didn't care or, more likely, didn't realize. He was very nice but quite dismissive and essentially told me to mix it on the console. To add to my stress, I started finding all sorts of mistakes and issues in the recording that would take more time to address. Despite this, we worked really well together. I felt I gave him more than enough information about my concerns, so I complied with his requests, knowing full well that we were going to face a plethora of problems down the road. I got to work as fast as I could. The producer was quite eccentric, but we got along nicely and he was thrilled with some of the tricks I was pulling out of my hat to address all these issues. At the end of every mix, I'd take copious notes on what physical buttons were pushed, what cables were connected to what, etc. I did this for every client I've worked with, just in case they ever wanted to come back and make edits to their records. Normally, I'll have my assistant or intern do this, but they specifically asked to not have an assistant or intern around. I was able to get through each of the songs somehow. I was honestly impressed with myself. The songs sounded good, but not good, as I didn't have enough time to make them good. They were happy with the mixes. The producer seemed quite surprised that they sounded the way they did, so I took that as a compliment. We ended on a good note, so I thought that was the end of it. A few days later, I get booked again for 2 hours. We normally don't book 2-hour blocks. It's just not worth it. However, I agreed to the 2-hour because there was another 8-hour session booked directly after, so it worked out perfectly. The studio manager didn't quite understand what I'd be doing in those 2 hours. The client was very vague and would not answer any of our questions about what they wanted to happen in those 2 hours. I show up for the session, and the producer from a few days before was there. Before I can even say hello, a car that costs more than what I make in 2 years comes whipping through the parking lot. This guy jumps out and begins barking orders at me. I put together that this must be the executive producer. For background, an executive producer is essentially the guy that knows nothing about the process, but has the money to fund it. It's a fancy name for the person who pays for everything. As he's barking orders at me, about 10 more ridiculously expensive cars pull in. I learned that the executive producer brought possible investors for his new record label into the studio to listen to the mixes and watch the executive producer manage a production team. After the executive producer greeted all his investors, he instructed everyone to go into the studio. I tried to get him alone to talk to him before, but he responded with, I'm going to do all the talking, you're going to do the work. He clearly wanted everybody to see how good he was at managing a production and such. He asked me to pull up the first song to play for his investors. I told him that if he wants to make any changes to the songs, I need at least 2 to 3 hours to set everything up before we can make changes. I told him I could play the songs for his investors, but I can't make any changes unless I take the 2 to 3 hours to set it up. I also said that I can't even do that today, since I have another client coming in 2 hours. As I'm saying this, I see the producer behind him smiling, clearly getting a lot of satisfaction from this. The executive producer literally turned red with anger and started yelling. I honestly couldn't understand half of what he said. When the executive producer stopped yelling, the producer cutely said, "I told you so." That's when I realized that the producer had actually been the one who maliciously complied with the executive producer to some degree. This is my favorite part. The executive producer handed me a $100 bill and said something like, "You have 10 minutes to set it up." He did this in front of his investors. I'm not sure what he was thinking would happen. Some of them literally laughed out loud and walked out. I was sick of it, so I emceed knowing that I could never set it up in time, making the executive producer look bad in front of his investors. So I started setting it up anyway. I didn't take the $100. As I was setting up, one of the investors came up to me and asked if I was actually able to set it up in 10 minutes. I told him it wasn't possible, so he turned around and walked out. About 10 minutes later, they all left because I didn't have everything set up yet. Later that week, the producer came back to work with me some more. We had a great working relationship from that point on. I talked with the producer about this whole thing, and he said that the executive producer hired him to help get this record label off the ground. The executive producer apparently didn't listen to anything the producer advised him on and treated him very poorly. So the producer decided to just comply with whatever executive producer wanted, knowing full well it wouldn't work out. He got sick of the executive producer's antics and just wanted out. The producer had informed the executive producer about everything that would go wrong before they booked me for the mix, and the executive producer completely disregarded him. The producer told me that the executive producer didn't want an intern or an assistant at the studio for the mix because he only wanted high-end music production people there. If assistant is in their title, they don't deserve to be there. It turns out that all the investors pulled out, and the band started to sue the executive producer for copyright infringement. That's a separate issue that I have no info on. Edit. Wow, I am blown away by all the comments. Thank you all for reading. Thank you for all your encouraging words as well. The malicious compliance was brilliantly executed. The executive producer's demands were unrealistic, and by complying with them, OP exposed his ignorance and arrogance. His public embarrassment in front of investors, all while staying professional, was perfectly done. Story from Danish protest pig. Dapper Dan fails to think things through. Not sure if this is malicious compliance or petty revenge. I graduated uni a few years back and immediately started looking for a job in my chosen field, marketing. Marketing entry-level roles were thin on the ground, so when I found a role which was hybrid of marketing with sales support, I took it. The company was a medium-sized business which specialized in recruitment, contractor hiring, and headhunting. They also subcontracted work for a recruitment technology provider, which matched up perfectly with one of my other passions, technology. I absolutely loved the role. I got to do all parts of the marketing and sales lifecycle. I got to work with suppliers, event organizers, clients, staff all across the company, meet new people, and do really exciting things. I had two managers, the one who managed the sales team and the one who managed marketing. The marketing manager was a kindred spirit. The sales manager was old school sales. An arrogant and headstrong late 40s man who lived for making deals and boasting about them. Shiny-shoed, silver-tongued. I'll call him Dapper Dan. We were not friends. For about 18 months, things went swimmingly. I'd do marketing half the time, then divide the rest of the time between sales support and billable work. Billable was building custom careers/job sites to host the recruitment system front end. A steep learning curve, but with the help of some web dev friends, I got pretty familiar with simple site builds. Being tech-aligned meant I was always looking digital first, bringing the company into the age of social media, SEO/SEM, website optimization, and multi-channel marketing. Dapper Dan sneered at such things. He saw digital as a waste of money. However, we were always able to justify the spend on digital by offsetting the billable website work. The marketing manager eventually moved on to bigger and better things. Rather than promote me or hire in a replacement, the company moved the marketing responsibilities to Dapper Dan. Dapper Dan's changes were immediate and far-reaching. He removed the digital budget. He required that 50% of my time would be sales support to better enable the sales team. He incorporated the billable work with his own team's revenue. He rewrote my annual objectives to align purely with sales targets rather than marketing. When I voiced my objections, he took me aside for a friendly chat and told me if I didn't like it, I could always leave. Naturally, I went and complained extensively to the departed marketing manager over drinks. After listening sympathetically for 45 minutes, she held up a hand, said, "Stop," and shared some life advice. Each job pays you twice. You get your money now, that's your wage. You also get experience now. That's how you get paid in the future. South. Are you still getting paid? Yes. Are you still learning? No. Figure out how to keep learning or leave. Taking the advice to heart, I busted my ass for the next year. I worked on digital outside of office hours. I made friends with the tech providers' support and dev teams. I went to developer group meetups, attended conferences, studied for and acquired industry qualifications. I joined the National Marketers and Digital Marketers group. I dug through blogs, articles, emailed people, took every opportunity to cross-skill, upskill, to learn. And I sat with a smile on my face in the sales meetings as Dapper Dan delegated dumb-do work to me so his team of sycophants could make the company's growth figures look spectacular. Spectacular they were, to the point that the company was acquired, and Dapper Dan betrayed me. You see, managers have the discretion to assign a pool of shares to high-performing staff. The shares have no real value and can't be traded, but in the event of a management buyout, they would suddenly have value, and quite a lot of value. Dapper Dan felt it appropriate to reward every salesperson in his team with a generous parcel of shares. As a support person, I would not be the beneficiary of such kindness. I'd had a verbal agreement with the previous marketing manager that the pool would be shared across the entire team, so was pretty shocked to discover I'd been excluded from the pool. I queried him on it, per the previous agreement, and he said, verbatim, "Well, an verbal agreement is only worth the paper it's written on. You don't make any sales, you haven't built the business, you don't get a cut. If you didn't like it," he reiterated, "you're welcome to leave." That is exactly what I decided to do. Except I didn't tell him. The way the contract handover works in this instance is that all staff cease employment with Company X on one day. The following day, they commence employment with Company Y. Annual leave is paid out and begins to reaccrue at the new employer. Other arrangements, salaries, long service leave and length of service, may be transferred to the new employer. About 6 weeks before the handover, Dapper Dan passed me my new contract. I waited a week, came back with some enthusiastic queries on the new benefits, which took him 2 weeks to follow up. I quietly registered a domain name and parked it, then spun up a WordPress instance and started building a personal blog. 3 weeks away from drop date, everyone's frantically running around getting all the deals as close as possible to closing, and employment contracts are the last thing on his mind. I go back to him, I tell him, I have a couple more things I need to check out, and I'll email them through to him before I sign it. I spend a few more nights throwing together a bunch of blog articles relating to recruitment technology. How to articles, that kind of stuff. Many of my own installation notes. A week passes, I fire off a couple of really complex questions around the transfer of benefits. He obviously forgets about them, then, in the week of the handover, catches heat from the HR team about the outstanding contract and pulls me into a meeting room to berate me about not having signed the new contract. I explain I'm waiting on his feedback on those specific points before I'll commit, that I don't want to be disadvantaged moving into the new role. Call out the lack of a share option as an example. Clearly frustrated, he drops the words I've been waiting for. If the signed contract is not on my desk on Friday, don't bother coming into the office Monday. He paused for dramatic effect and reiterated, I mean it, you won't have a job. I replied that I completely understand and that I'll have everything he needs on his desk by close of business Friday. On Friday afternoon, Dapper Dan leaves the office early to attend his normal client networking visits, which typically involve long lunches and alcohol. At 4:45 p.m., I save the final set of forecasting and reporting to the share drive, send an email to the IT team, passing over access to the marketing LastPass account, which contains the global database of usernames and passwords for all digital assets, including client sites, an Excel workbook containing my reporting macros, and the location of all my documentation. I redirect my phone to Dapper Dan's desk number, lock my laptop, and leave it on his desk along with my ID card. Over the weekend, I push my personal website live and add my contact details to my LinkedIn profile, switching it to actively searching mode. I figure my holiday pay will cover me for a couple of weeks of downtime before I have to go diving back into the workforce. On Monday, I'm enjoying a long walk in the spring sunshine with my dog, who's incredibly happy that his human has not disappeared down the driveway at 0720 per normal. We stop for coffee at a local cafe, and my phone begins to ring. It's one of the sales drones at Old Company. I ignore it and thoroughly enjoy the freedom of being able to amble through a park without anywhere to be. The phone buzzes another 8 or 10 times by the time I get home. The poop has well and truly hit the windmill. I check my voicemails, ignoring those I know from my previous employer and returning the phone calls of 2 ex-clients to let them know that my contract has ended and to check in with Dapper Dan for work in progress, or contact the technology provider for support requests. Shortly afterwards, I got a call from a bemused contact who works at the technology provider who's been fielding support calls that I'd normally handle. He listens with increasing interest as I explained the situation, then tells me he'd call back shortly. 10 minutes later, he's back with the head of product on the line, asking about my lunch preferences. She arranges to meet me at a nearby Thai place. Over a delicious red duck curry, she cheerfully describes the wonders of a career as a contractor. She also mentions the day rates for highly qualified, industry-certified staff, mentioned that tech provider were really struggling to find such staff, and gives me the number of a recruiter who may or may not have been on tech suppliers' preferred supplier list. I call the recruiter on the way home. Meanwhile, my collection of voicemails from Dapper Dan was growing by the hour as he came to grips with the breadth of the problem that he'd generated. At some point in the late afternoon, HR must have clicked to what had happened, and I received a polite SMS from the personal number of the regional HR directory asking if I was available for a quick chat. I called through and discussed the options presented to me by Dapper Dan on Friday, and that I felt I had no option but to follow his instructions. They probed for more information, and it became apparent they were unaware that Dapper Dan had pulled an ultimatum without first engaging HR. They then informed me that to benefit from the sale of my shares, I would need to transfer to the new company and remain in their employment for a full year. When I explained that I had no such share options, there was a full 4-second silence. It transpires that this too was not adequately communicated to HR. I mentioned that I'd appreciate it if Dapper Dan could discontinue his voicemails to me, as I found them unprofessional and had no intent of recommencing employment under his management. We ended the call politely. I wished them all the best and regretted the conversation had to happen under such circumstances. My contract for tech provider came through via the PSL agency at 11 p.m. that evening and was signed and returned the following day. I was deployed to client site that Wednesday, post-departure. I met up with one of the old IT team at a conference 3 months after it all went down. He was ecstatic to fill me in on what had happened. The first notice anyone got of it was the service desk asking who they should route my LastPass account to and why I'd be passing it around. One of the techs came up to my floor to find me, then found an empty desk. Asked around for where I'd moved to and no one knew. That was the first call, from one of the sales drones trying to locate me. The tech went to Dapper Dan's desk and found my laptop with my ID and post-it note taped to it. He put two and two together, went back downstairs and checked the access logs and realized the last time I'd logged in was Friday. He then locked my account for security purposes and went to HR to check if there was a leaver form. HR checks, no leaver form, and a great big red cross next to employment contract received. HR calls Dapper Dan, who's not in the office. Dapper Dan says, "No, contract should be on my desk. It was on there on Friday. I'm out on the road at the moment. Give me till lunchtime and I'll sort it out." Obviously thinking that I'm grandstanding, starts to call me and leave messages, then gets progressively agitated as he realizes I'm not coming back. When he gets into the office, he can't find the contract either, so he goes to HR and explains what has happened. Says, "I have been stonewalling them and it's cool. He'll get it sorted. It's between me and him." HR says, "No, this is our thing now." And the HRD sends me the SMS. Shortly after my phone conversation, the HRD walks into a sales meeting and very abruptly pulls Dapper Dan out. They disappear into a meeting room where it may only be assumed that Dapper Dan was required to spell out exactly what had occurred and address the comments that I had made. I suspect he came completely clean at that stage. Dapper Dan was subsequently reamed as only HR and senior management can ream a manager who's He was demoted, decoupled from marketing, his budget reduced by half, and a new, separate marketing function created. His team were collectively put under review and forced to carry out their own reporting, tracking, and metrics, which lacked the coherence and consistency that I'd been able to deliver. This reduced the capacity of the team. A couple of them left, and they missed out on some key deals. In the fallout, they completely dropped the ball on the client website builds. They went to market to try and find a resource who could fulfill these builds, and Dapper Dan was reportedly astounded to discover that experienced technical marketing staff are both hard to find and expensive to recruit. They were unable to fill the role, and the builds were taken back in-house by the tech provider, who now had an experienced resource to deploy: me. I ended up working on 3 of these at full utilization rate, which was paid by the new company. I'm pretty sure Dapper Dan would have seen the funding arrangements for these and would know my day rate, which is substantially higher than his. Much later as the sales lead, Dapper Dan had to bear the displeasure of his superiors for the full 12 months before he could claim his share payout. It would have been a really 12 months for him. He resigned within 2 weeks of the anniversary of the purchase, and the company enforced a 6-month notice period and another 12-month no-compete clause. Any benefit he would have received from the share payout would have been consumed over that 12 months, unless he switched industries or moved cities. Last time I saw, he was on the job market. As for me, happily living the life of the contractor. I get paid for the hours I work, and I work the hours I want. My old marketing manager is now VP of something at a large multinational. I've used her speech several times when giving young, frustrated staff career advice. DR, old school sales manager, attempts to call my bluff. Hilarity ensues. It was a perfect revenge, which was executed flawlessly. By quietly preparing for his exit, OP ensured that Dapper Dan's actions backfired spectacularly, leading to Dan's downfall. It was a perfect example of calculated and strategic revenge. Story Free Dalto. I don't make the rules, I just enforce them. This story happened about a year ago. It requires a lot of context, so I'm sorry about the length, but it's unavoidable. I'm also pretty sure this is going to be slightly controversial. I guess it could have gone in R/AITA2, LOL. So I work in college dorms in a sort of generic first response role. We do a bit of everything, mostly security, but also medical, fire, psych. It's a weird and often quite tough job, but quite rewarding. These dorms are kind of like a gated community a couple miles away from the main campus. At the top of this village, there's a hub where all the staff are based. It also serves as a venue for events and has some facilities for the students, catering, gym, etc., as well as a few meeting facilities in the staff area, which any department in the college can book out if they so wish. Between the staff parking spots and the back doors, there are also disabled parking spaces. Now, one day I was coming in for my 10-hour night shift, and to my dismay, I found that all the staff parking spots were occupied, which basically never happens. But I knew that the HR department had a big thing there that afternoon, in the meeting facilities I mentioned, so I figured out what was going on. And though it's not technically against the parking policy, they are college staff after all. Usually, staff who don't actually work in the building are expected to park in the visitor parking bays, not the staff parking. So I had a problem. It was 10 minutes till the start of my shift. I'm not allowed to use the student car parks. What about the visitor parking? Well, that gets locked up overnight, until after my shift ends. If I parked there, then in the morning, I'd have to go unlock the visitor parking, bring the key back, leave, and one of my day shift colleagues would have to go lock it back up. My only other option was to park down the hill. But then, by the time I got there and walked back up, I'd be late for my shift and miss the handover. You see where this is going? I want to make it clear that I would never normally park in a disabled bay. It's generally a scummy thing to do. I'm disabled myself, but not in a way that entitles me to use disabled parking. However, there are a few things to note here. Nobody ever uses those bays unless we have a disabled person coming in for an event, because the back door is key card access only and there's no bell, so it's little use to students or members of the public unless they've made a prior arrangement to be let in. There weren't any events scheduled that night, and the chances of someone disabled randomly deciding they need to park at the back of the hub, which is near nothing else, unannounced, is negligible. Never mind 3 of them. Remember, there's 3 bays in total. Besides, in the middle of the night, they could just park next to it at the side of the road, because there's about as much traffic there at night as on Route 50. So, I decided I'd park in one of the disabled bays, the one farthest from the door, next to the staff spaces. Due to the long and unsociable hours, I get to take breaks liberally, as long as it doesn't interfere with anything. In the extremely unlikely event that more than 2 disabled people had called in to park and access the building, which I'd find out about during handover, I'd just take a break right after starting, drive my car away down the hill, and walk back up. I go in, get the handover, and as expected, no one is expected to come in. I was the supervisor for that shift. Our shift patterns are rotating, and the longest in service is the supervisor. So I set up my colleagues for the shift, log on, set up the cameras the way I want them, read my emails, turn on my radio, yada yada. After a while, I get one of the guys, Phil, to cover the cameras so I can go tell a resident he's getting disciplined for vandalism. I then have one of those golden sitcom moments where I open the office door right before someone was about to knock on it. I recognize her immediately. She's the Dean of Facilities. We'll call her Karen. Now, we're not in the facilities section. We're in the auxiliary services section. So, this lady is not my boss in any capacity. She is, however, far higher up the food chain than me, so it's this awkward situation where, unless I have a great reason not to, I still have to bow down to her, or I'll get called into HR for insubordination, especially since the building we're in is technically operated by the facilities section. Some more contexts. Karen is one of the most hated figures among low-level staff in the entire college, your classic power trip box. You can practically see the perverse arousal in her eyes whenever she talks down to anyone on a lower salary than her, which is all the time, and she's pulled no end of downright evil in her many years with the institution. So a startled Karen practically pushes me back into the office. It turns out she was attending whatever event the HR department had on in the building that afternoon, and she was one of the people parked in the staff spaces out back. Now, she doesn't have an office in the building, so, by convention, she should be parking in the visitor spaces. But again, that's not technically in the policy. Anyway, she saw my car parked in the disabled bay on her way back to her car. She knows who I am. We've had numerous, always unpleasant interactions in the past, and she saw my name on the staff sticker in my windshield. Karen. Where do you get off thinking you can park in the disabled bay, OP? Me. Well, nobody uses those. Karen. Oh, what? So you think you're above the rules just because it's you who enforces them? Me. Look, it's no big deal. I'll go move the car. Karen. Oh no, not on the college's time you don't. Me. I'll take it off my break. Karen. Nope. Breaks are for relaxation. Moving your car is not relaxation. Me. Well, then what do you want me to do? Karen. I want you to issue yourself the standard $70 fine. See what I mean about the power boner? Me. Are you serious? Karen. Absolutely. You need to learn that you don't make the rules. You just enforce them. At this point, I stare at her in disbelief. Now, I have a short fuse at the best of times, and I really want to yell bloody at her. But I value my job, so I swallow my pride and go write myself a ticket. More contexts there. We're essentially subcontracted by the city to do the parking and traffic enforcement for all roads and parking on college land. So the authority behind these tickets is the city, not the college. I know if I go talk to that vandal student now, I'll just let off steam at the kid unfairly, when it already wasn't going to be a pleasant talking to. And I know that sitting and staring at the cameras would just make me seethe, so I go restock the staff kitchen, then talk to the kid, and after that, I get back to the office. Bear in mind that Phil, my buddy who I put on the cameras, witnessed the whole thing. Is the Kiwant still here? I ask. She's just on her way out now, he says, pointing at one of the cameras, followed by, huh, that's weird, she's leaving through the front. Karen regularly comes here to use the gym at the end of the workday. It's free for students and staff. That's presumably what she was doing today too, seeing as it's now been a good 45 minutes since she humiliated me. When she does that, she takes a cab home because she lives at the opposite end of the city and traffic is a nightmare at this time in the evening. And we all know it's a million times less awful being stuck in traffic if it isn't you who's driving. She then takes a cab back in the next morning to pick up her car and drive to the main campus. It's now that I make a beautiful, almost erotic realization. Yeah, I'm a hypocrite, sue me. I pull up the parking policy, scroll through it, and there it is, in delicious, bold lettering. It is not permissible for members of staff to leave their cars parked in a staff parking area during non-working hours. It then lists a few exceptions, mainly breaks and stuff like that, none of which apply to Karen. So I'm about to write a ticket when I have an even better idea. You see, our cameras are pretty snazzy. About 6 years ago, all the cameras that monitor the roadways were updated to plate recognition cameras by the city. So now, on top of 40 days of saved camera footage, we also have the plate log, which has, so far, been kept indefinitely and can be used to figure out when a car entered the compound and when a car left, since we only have 3 entry-exit roads. I explain my plan to Phil. He has absolutely no reservations about doing me a solid and spending time going back through the plate log system to see how many times Karen has left her car parked here overnight. 4 hours later, and he's assembled all the dates. Over the past 4 years and however many months, weeks and days since the plate system came online, Karen has left her car overnight on a staggering 585. Yes, 585 separate occasions. So I log into the city's Fine Portal software. Yep, that's actually what it's called. You can only write tickets for ongoing, momentane violations. If you spot something using auxiliary systems like cameras or what have you. After the fact, you need to issue a fine by mail. I put in her office address and start entering all 585 dates, times, and copy and paste the reference to the exact part of the parking policy as well as the city statute that gives this policy the force of law for each single one. The result is a thing of beauty, spanning 13 pages and totaling $40,950. At this point, all the guys are back in the office, so I call them round, knowing they'll all enjoy this almost as much as me. When I press log and print, I'm hit with a warning I've never seen before. The fine you are about to issue exceeds $10,000. Are you sure you wish to proceed? Everyone is dumbstruck. I start laughing, then Phil, and then everyone else. It's glorious. I print it, stuff it in a windowed, prepaid city envelope, and put it in the external mail. The city doesn't allow us to use the internal mail, nor hand deliver fines. I guess it's for paper trail reasons. The cherry on top is, I then get to also issue a ticket and put it under her windshield, because, of course, she's also there that night. Of course, the next time I come into work after she receives this, she's waiting for me in the office. Karen: what the hell, OP? Do you really think this is going to fly? Me, with puppy dog eyes: what do you mean? Karen: the ticket, the f***ing fines. Do you really think this will fly? Me: rules are rules, Karen. Karen: you know as well as I do that that's never actually been done here. Me: well, Karen, I don't make the rules. I just enforce them. Exit Karen, stage right. Now there's more to this, some good, some bad. I'll start with the bad. Karen ended up suing. I had to go to court on my day off. The silver lining was I was theoretically there representing the city, and so I wasn't being sued personally and had the city attorney. The court ended up reducing the fine to $10,000, which was apparently the city's maximum for post facto fines issued at one time. I guess that's why the warning was there. But Karen had sued to get the fine dismissed entirely, so it was still a victory, kinda. She also tried to take it up with HR, but the Dean of Auxiliary Services also hates her, and he stuck up for me to HR, so that went nowhere. The best thing, though? This year, I was appointed to the Auxiliary Services Policy Review Board. Last week, I managed to get the parking policy amended. It now says that if staff visits a building other than where their office is, unless they are teaching a class, they need to use visitor parking if there are fewer than 20 staff parking bays at the building and there are empty visitor bays. So, starting in June, Karen won't be allowed to park in the staff spots at all. And of course, all of us will be vigilantly enforcing that. TLDR. Karen forces me to issue myself a $70 parking fine. She ends up with a $10,000 parking fine because I suddenly become a stickler for the rules. It was perfect revenge. Karen's hypocrisy led to her downfall, and the OP used her own rigid enforcement against her. The execution was satisfying, with undeniable proof and a huge financial consequence. Next story from Bloopyhead. TLDR. After we started work on a contract for an urgent and very delivery date sensitive project, a procurement exec fooled us into getting started before contract signature, and then used all sorts of excuses and played dumb as much as realistically possible to delay execution of the contract in order to irritate us and get us to abandon our principles out of sheer frustration. When we realized these tactics, we used the same tactics and turned them against him. We won. I wish I had a juicier outcome than just, we won. But I got a pretty good business and life lesson out of it. 15 years ago, my company developed a unique software for a big company. It's basically a software that manages the workforce. For that initial work years ago, they didn't want to pay the whole upfront cost to write the software, so they agreed to a reduced price, but with a never-ending annual license, which included support and maintenance. The product had been stable, so we mostly collected the annual license fee and did some basic support here and there, and added incremental features for a fee, so we recouped our fees and got a better long-term outcome this way. A couple of years ago, they changed their procurement and payment systems, and we had several invoices go unpaid. Some ended up being 36 months late. Not because of any technical reasons, but because of ineptitude. The monthly email reminders were ignored, and because the threads that lasted from 1 month to the next and from manager to manager were just insane, with hundreds of replies and up to 50 people CC'd at one point, going over the same topics over and over again constantly, with them asking for proof of the work performed, for proof of the work request, proof of managerial approval for the work request, for copies of the invoices that we sent that were already there 4 times an email thread, and so on. Right when we thought we would wrap up the thread, someone would say, "Wait, what are we talking about again?" And the whole thread would just go for another iteration of the craziness. It was a total nightmare, enough to make anyone lose their marbles. We eventually got paid. But goddamn, about 5 years ago, they called us up and said, "We're bringing in new back-end systems at our production facility, so you have to do a major update to your software so that it can talk to our new systems. The new systems will be online January 1st, so it's critical that no matter what your system must be ready by then." So we quickly agree on a price for the updates. We're told the contract will follow the following week. They assign a project manager, coordinator, and we start working right away because we need every minute if we're to make that deadline. Except the contract doesn't come. Instead, we're put in touch with the procurement guy to finalize the details. Let's call this guy Ashish. Ashish was also on the previous email threads and not exactly on the ball then. A warning sign. Time. Tick-tock. First, Ashish proceeds to ask me for a copy of the old master contract. Then he tells me that he doesn't understand it and that we'll need a new master contract in the future. Then he says he doesn't understand what the software does and as far as he's concerned, it's just a nice to have for the company. Then he says it should be free of charge, since it's included in the maintenance and support, but no, the changes they want are 10 plus years out and out of scope from the original requirements. Of course, we're polite as we answer, but there's something about the way he writes and asks for stuff that makes us believe he's either just dumb or severely overloaded and or out of touch, and or our small contract is just a pebble in his shoe and just loses focus. But still, he nitpicks about details of the agreement, about things that make no sense and that clearly shows he's totally unaware of the context. Since he's my single point of contact to get the paperwork done, I'm starting to lose patience. Time. Tick-tock. We exchange several drafts, all of which contain more of his impossibly stupid requests and details that are completely unrelated to the task at hand. I mean, who the hell is this guy? I waste a ton of hours, days actually, explaining what the project is about, why XYZ is necessary, and why ABC clause doesn't apply. Once we eventually agree on a final, good enough draft ready for me to sign, it doesn't come. Time. Tick-tock. He calls me one day and says he wants to redo the whole thing because he thinks it's not properly framed and wants me to make him an entirely new proposal, and we have to get a new master agreement anyway. Me make a new proposal? For what? We had just agreed to the price and wording for what the new update does. He then proceeds to tell me that as far as he's concerned, it should even be free, so the new contract should take that into account. I explained to him that it's definitely not a nice to have, and that it won't be free, and that if we don't get this done, production will grind to a halt due to the particular problem that our software solves. So I refuse, telling him we're already well underway with the work. He says fine, and says that he'll send the last draft ASAP. Time. Tick-tock. A few more weeks go by, and almost every day I email to get status. Nothing. I eventually get a note from him asking if my new proposal is ready for him to review. Oh, FFS. I get on the phone with him. We start afresh with a new round of him not understanding anything about the work and the contract, him discussing issues that are irrelevant, wanting guarantees that make no sense, and a nonsensical wording of the work involved. Oh, and BTW, he now wants to know our cost basis for doing the work because it's too expensive, and we'll have to review the price down. Yet again, during all this time, he seems genuinely confused or unaware of context or the pressures the company is under with this. And more, I'm flabbergasted as to why this is the guy in charge of negotiating our contract. As much as I explain again and again, nothing seems to register, or if it does, we're back to square one the following day. I'm going completely insane dealing with this. One day, over beer, I explain the situation to one of my buddies and he laughs. Damn, this guy is really having fun. Acting dumb like this is one of the many tactics that procurement people will use to erode all of your patience in the hope that you'll eventually just throw up your hands up in the air and say, fine, and sign whatever. Either just out of sheer frustration or because the alternative is just no contract, no payment for all of the work you've already put in. Trust me, this guy knows what he's doing. The proper counter-response to this? Just play dumb too. But he knows you by now, so pretending to be dumb will be seen as acting in bad faith. So simply withdraw from the negotiations and put him in front of a totally new guy. And have that new guy be as clueless as possible and have as little authority as possible in the negotiations, unable to approve any decision, and make him get back to him with unrelated questions and just enough nonsense. Next, tell the procurement guy you're going on vacation and that your team has stopped the work until a contract is signed. Maybe he's really dumb, but I doubt it. I think he'll wise up real fast. Brilliant. I get back home from the pub and I check Ashish's LinkedIn profile. Senior VP Procurement. Education, Harvard Business School. Right, this guy's not an idiot. He was fucking with me the whole time. Next morning, I talk to my management team and explain the situation. They all get a laugh and are willing to participate in the theatrics. I write Ashish an email saying that I am putting him in touch with Arnold, CC'd, that I was taking vacation and an extra 3-month sabbatical, and that we will resume the work once the agreement is signed. It worked perfectly. The ignorance my co-worker played was brilliant, completely believable. Ashish became increasingly restless in his emails, and suddenly transformed from being the clueless guy to the sharp exec he actually was, as he realized he might be the cause for the project to fail and to not be delivered in time. In the end, we signed the document a few weeks after Arnold took over. We didn't give an inch. We delivered on time. The lower managers at Big Company were relieved. They too were completely flabbergasted with the stupid email chains, but they were powerless to intervene. The revenge was flawless, and it was executed perfectly. By flipping the script and making Ashish taste his own medicine, the OP turned a frustrating situation into a masterclass in negotiation. The plan was executed brilliantly, exposing Ashish's tactics and forcing him to concede completely. Story from Nova Evil Capitalist. Car dealer tells me I should waste my time and go to a competing dealer because they also won't give me the price they list on their website. This is a rather long, detailed story, so if you're the impatient sort, please skip to the bottom, though note you're missing out on fun details. This took place 8 years ago, when I was buying my first new car, not just a new-to-me car. I spent a good amount of time researching the options available, both in terms of other models from other manufacturers and option packages on the car in which I was most interested, so I knew exactly what I wanted coming in the door. In 2014, car dealer websites hadn't quite gotten to the level of borderline bait-and-switch trickery you see these days, so if a dealer's website said they had a particular car on the lot at a particular price, they almost certainly did. There were several in the region that matched what I was looking for, one specifically at my existing dealership. This wasn't a smaller dealership, it was one of the largest in the Northern Virginia area for this particular brand. I had had a reasonably good experience with their service department overall, and figured I'd give their sales department a chance to shine. That was my first mistake. I showed up on a Wednesday after work. It was early June, so with the mercury being in the upper 90s, I was dressed in a comfortable, but still very presentable combination of a polo shirt and khaki shorts. When I entered the sales side of the dealership, I could see what appeared to be all the salespeople in a conference room laughing and joking while taking scissors to the tie of one of the men present. Later, I found out that was a rite of passage after making your first sale. I waited around for a minute or two as the conference room had glass walls, and it would be impossible not to notice me as I'm not exactly a small fellow at 6 feet, 6 inches tall. When no one came out to greet me, I went up to the receptionist's desk and said, "Hi, I'm interested in model of car, and there's one in stock I'd like to see." Her response, without even looking up from her phone, was, "Okay." I stood there for another 20 seconds or so and then politely asked, "Would someone be able to show me that car?" This finally prompted her to look up from her phone. She looked me up and down, scoffed a bit, and said she'd go and get someone. I was willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, hoping that things would turn around. That was my second mistake. The receptionist came back with what looked like the youngest, most wet behind the ears salesperson she could find, as evidently I wasn't worth the time of the more experienced folks. I explained that I was interested in a car that their website said they had in stock and provided him with the printout, showing the stock number, price, and all other pertinent details. It took him a while to find the car on the lot, but after a brief test drive, I knew it was what I wanted and began the sales process. I had a trade-in, which had been primarily serviced by them and for which I already had a written offer from CarMax, so I knew how much I should receive for it. He quoted me just over half of that figure. When I pointed out that I could get several thousand more by taking it to the CarMax just up the road and had a written offer from them for that specific amount, he went and got his sales manager, who offered to drive me there and pick me up afterwards, but that they wouldn't match what CarMax offered. I was a bit surprised that they didn't want a nice used car to sell for themselves. 6 years old, top of the line, reasonable mileage, and serviced by them specifically. But again, cut them more slack than they deserved. When we got to price, things really fell apart. He quoted me a price that was several $1,000s higher than what they displayed on their website. When I showed him the printout again with the noticeably lower price, he looked to the sales manager for guidance. The sales manager immediately took the line that the price listed includes all available rebates and special offers, and you may not qualify for all of them. I was now frustrated and showed them printouts from the other dealers in the area that had a similar price shown and said that if they weren't willing to honor the price listed on their website, I'd just go to the next closest dealer that had that model in stock at that price. His response sealed the deal for me. Go ahead, waste your time, and go to competing dealership. We won't hold it against you when you come back here. I told them, okay, thank you for your time. I'll go to competing dealership, and got up to leave. No one stopped me, and the receptionist said nothing as I walked past her out to the parking lot to drive to the other dealership. When I got to the competing dealership, it was already around 8 p.m., as I had spent a fair amount of time at the first dealership, and Northern Virginia traffic has never been known for being reasonable. I had a salesperson approach me immediately upon entering the dealership, and I explained, I've just come from first dealership and want to buy particular model of car. Both of you have that car in stock with the options I want. They wouldn't give it to me at the price shown on their website. If you will, I'm ready to sign on the dotted line right now. The salesperson immediately took me to his office, verified that they had the car, and confirmed that yes, the price on their website was accurate and I could walk out the door with that price. We started the process, and when we got to the trade-in, I further explained how the other dealership tried to lowball me on the trade. He said if I could produce a written offer from CarMax for the price I mentioned, they would match it. I gave him that paperwork, and without any further discussion, he agreed they would match that, and we moved on to financing. I hadn't gotten this far with the other dealer, but I had already lined up financing through my credit union. He asked if I'd be willing to see if his F&I guy could match or beat that figure. I agreed to let him try, and he came back with a rate that was 50 basis points lower. Needless to say, I was already very happy with these people, but that definitely sealed the deal. Right as I was finishing the paperwork, the salesperson from the first dealer texted me to ask if they would give me the car at that price. I responded back that they would, and I was finishing up the paperwork at that very moment. He immediately tried to call me, then texted me saying he'd give it to me for $500 less. I responded to his text stating that I'd already signed the paperwork and he had lost the sale. Once the paperwork was complete, the exceptionally pleasant and helpful salesperson at my new dealership spent an additional half hour after the dealership had closed for the night, running me through some of the features of the car and showing me how the infotainment system worked. This was completely above and beyond what I expected, as I thought I'd just be reading the 300-page user manual to figure it out on my own. I drove home that night with my shiny new car, a very happy camper. The next day, I decided to rub a little salt in the wounds of the first dealership, so I drove there straight from the office. For context, I work in the banking industry, and at that point, it was still very much business formal dress. I showed up in my suit with my briefcase and had people falling all over themselves trying to help me, including the receptionist who clearly remembered who I was midway through me asking for the particular salesperson I dealt with the prior day. She offered me a seat and asked if I wanted some coffee while she went to get him, and I politely said, "No, thank you. I won't be here long." She somewhat quietly, sheepishly responded that she'd be back with that salesperson very shortly. There was a couple in the waiting area who seemed a bit displeased that they'd been waiting for a salesperson, but I got one the moment I walked in the door. No more than a minute later, the salesperson and his manager came out. The salesperson recognized me and, with a look of defeat on his face, shook my hand and asked how I was today. Before I had a chance to respond, the sales manager spoke up to introduce himself as if I hadn't spent an hour and a half with him the previous day. After I reminded him that I was there yesterday, and he had said it would be a waste of time to go the competing dealer because they'd never give me the car I wanted at the price shown on their website, his demeanor very quickly pivoted back to the snotty, insolent person I dealt with the previous day. He proceeded to ask, "Well, did they?" with a bit of a sneer. I said nothing but turned to the side and clicked the remote for my new car so the horn would give a few chirps. He said, "Good for you," in a rather curt tone and walked away, leaving the poor salesperson on his own. I shook that salesperson's hand, thanked him for his time, and turned around to leave. The receptionist spoke up as I walked past her and asked in a rather chipper voice if I needed any further assistance. I politely responded that no, the other dealership had provided me exactly what I needed, and I was all set. To make things just that little bit better, as I passed the couple sitting in the waiting area, I saw them exchange looks with each other that seemed to say, "Perhaps we should go to the dealer I mentioned." I said nothing further and walked out of the building wearing the smile of a winner. TLDR car dealer treats me poorly and won't honor the price they list for a car. Tells me that I should waste my time and go to a competing dealer in the area because they also won't honor the price they list for the car. But the competing dealer does honor the price, and I get a fine new car at a very nice price. The malicious compliance was flawless. The salesperson's dismissive attitude led to an unforgettable experience. Not only did OP get a better deal elsewhere, but his returning with the new car proved the first dealership's arrogance wrong and humiliated him well. Story form condiments for you. Condiments, the great. Hi all, Happy New Year's. In reviewing some of my best memories of the last few years, I remembered an incident of malicious compliance that I found overwhelmingly satisfying and thought it'd be worth sharing. While not as outrageous as some of the stories here, it left me feeling like I stuck it to our corporate overlords a bit. To set the stage, I moved back to the US to take a job at a pretty big firm where I was also tasked with executive assistant responsibilities. My boss would regularly send me downstairs to our local bank to pick up and deposit cash. Having newly moved back to the US, I needed to set up a bank account for direct deposits and figured the one downstairs makes sense. Also, it made depositing paychecks quicker and easier. On the day I went to open the account, the manager of the branch sat me down to go through all the paperwork. She was nice enough at first, and I got through everything quite quickly. That said, when it came to the sinuate portion, I thought I'd have a bit of fun with it and create a silly signature. Having just watched a Roman documentary the night before, I made my signature The Great. Obviously, I used my first name in place of condiments. The manager did non-bat an eye at this, assuming she didn't read it, and said she'd process everything and give me a call when my card is ready to collect. Cut to a little later, I receive a call from the manager saying there's something wrong with the paperwork and I needed to come down to correct it. When I ask what the problem is, she says that I'm not allowed to have a signature like that and I need to redo it using my actual name. I say, okay, and that I'll be right down. This kind of pissed me off though, because I've seen wild signatures that hardly resemble letters, yet they were still accepted. I did some quick research and found that, legally, a signature can be any mark that I plan on using consistently. It didn't have to be a name, nor even resemble letters. Being bored that day, I decided to press it and print out the laws regarding signatures, and bring them with me to the bank. When I met the manager, I told her that I'd actually like to keep the signature as is and provided her with the documents I printed outlining the laws. She did not seem enthused at all and said she'd need a moment to discuss with her superiors. A few minutes later, she comes back and says, "While I'm correct about the law, they require the signature to match the one on my driver's license, since that's the one currently associated with me." I pushed back and mentioned that I wanted to have a new signature, but she was firm on it matching my ID or they wouldn't open my account. Cue malicious compliance. I realized then that since the state I moved to was different from the one I lived in before, I had to legally update my license. So I told the manager I'd think it over and get back to her soon. I hurried upstairs and made a DMV appointment for later that week to get a new license. The day of the DMV appointment, I brought everything I needed to ensure I walked out with a new license. When it was time for me to provide a signature for the license, I again wrote "The Great" and was again met with pushback. The teller literally said, "Sir, this is the DMV and we don't play games like that." Welp, I whipped out the law to show them that I am actually allowed to use this as my signature, and the teller's ego deflated real fast. Long story short, I walked out that day with a shiny new license and my new signature. I drove directly from the DMV back to the bank and met with the teller. I told her that I will agree to sign the documents using the same signature on my license. I don't think she could have looked any smugger. She took me back to the office and sat me down to resign the documents, and I did so as the Great. When she says this, she practically started shouting about how I'm wasting their time and either need to get serious or they'll have me escorted out. This is when I slowly removed my brand new ID and slid it across the desk. Her face went blank, and I honestly couldn't tell what she was thinking. She asked me to leave the office for a moment so she could make a call. 10 minutes later, she comes out and says, "While my signature does match the one on my license, they are just refusing to do business with me and asked me to leave." Not knowing the legality of that, I said, "Okay," and accepted defeat. I walked back up to my office and told the boss that they're not allowing me to open an account. I told him the full story, and he actually found it hilarious. He then said that he'd handle it. Later that day, I received a call from the bank saying that they changed their mind and that they've opened the checking and savings accounts I requested. I went to speak with my boss after who said that he had a productive chat with the manager. Knowing how much business he provides the bank, he was happy enough to bluff on my behalf. He essentially told the manager that not allowing me to open an account was directly affecting his business and that if they don't oblige, he'd close his accounts and take his business elsewhere. Apparently that threat hit hard, and the manager quickly backtracked, saying that they never refused my business, just had to get approval from upper management. At the end of the day, I was victorious and still use this signature on all official documents. It's a bit silly, but it's my trophy and a good conversation starter. TLDR. A bank refused to open an account for me after signing the document with Condiments the Great. They said it had to match his signature on my ID, so I updated my license with the same signature. This malicious compliance was brilliantly executed, and it was really perfect. Updating the license to outsmart the bank was a masterstroke, and at the same time hilarious, and OP's boss's intervention sealed the victory. Story from Not Dagia. Music teacher gets mad at me for not being able to hear her. I'm deaf. Hi, my first post on Reddit, so please excuse any formatting mistakes and any other mistakes. Obligatory statement that I'm on mobile, yada yada yada. TL. DR at the bottom for you lazy cows/S. So this happened a couple years ago when I was fresh at high school in year 7. I was in the grade for 11-year-olds for international peeps. One important thing to note with me is that I'm profoundly deaf in both ears and cannot hear a single thing without the use of my cochlear implants, CI. However, I can lip read pretty accurately, so I'm not completely lost without them. Another thing to note is that my I run on batteries and these need to be replaced every approximately 2 days. This will be important later on. Most of the teachers were pretty understanding about this and would often go out of their way to make sure that I could clearly hear what they were saying, such as seating me towards the front of the class and standing directly in front of me when addressing the whole class. Except for one teacher who was a harass about it. She also happened to be a music teacher. She will be known as MSO. Also, this is probably the worst combo because music is also my weakest subject, for obvious reasons. Enter malicious compliance. My form, we're a pretentious school and like to call the class that we register and go to lessons with our form, are off to our music lesson. And this happens to be a double period. Yes, we're pretentious and period means lesson, which is about 1 hour and 30 minutes long. Anyway, so we start the lesson, and pretty much 2 minutes after we sit down, the batteries in my CI had run flat. Remember how I told you earlier that they go flat every 2 days? And so I needed to change them. However, as my bag, which had my batteries in it, was in the room next door, I decided to raise my hand, like an obedient little boy, and ask if I can go and grab my batteries. At this point, I could still lip read and understand what the teacher was saying, but I'd much rather be able to hear LOL. Anyways, she pretty much ignores the fact that my hand is up, and after a couple minutes, I pretty much get the hint that she doesn't want to answer my question. I thought, whatever, I can still lip read and understand most of what she's saying. So MSL basically asks the whole class to go on the computers, listen to an audio file she'd sent us via email, and then use that as inspiration to digitally create our own piece of music. She also wanted us to show it to the class at the end of the lesson. Now, because I didn't want to get into trouble, I raise my hand again to try and ask if I can get the batteries from my bag, but she ignores me again. I don't even like music anyway, so no big deal. As a result, I pretty much sit in front of the computer screen doing nothing, as I can't hear the audio file or make any somewhat decent piece of music. Remember, this is a double period, so a pretty long wait. After 5 minutes, I get bored, and I decide to start talking to my friends. Did I mention I can lip read? And basically, let them in on the joke, and we're all trying our hardest to not laugh too hard. Pretty soon, word gets around the class, and now they can't wait until the end of the lesson to see what Miss L's going to do. End of the lesson rolls around, and when it's my turn to play my piece of music, and I pretty much sit in silence, and the whole class starts laughing but trying to stifle it at the same time. This is how the conversation goes between me and her at that point. Miss L, can you not hear me? I asked you to play your piece of music. Ironic, IKR. Me, sits in silence, and the laughter is getting louder. Ms. L, are you even listening to me? Are you trying to disrespect me by not listening to anything I say? Me, well, Ms. L, honestly, just play your piece of music. It's not that hard. Me, trying to stifle my laughter at this point, I can't. Ms. L cuts me off. This is how you treat your teachers? Get out of the class right now. So I get out and pretty much wait there until the lesson is over. I think she was expecting an apology from me, which was never going to happen, because after a couple minutes she pops her head out of the door and barks at me. You have absolutely no respect for your teachers. Meet me at the City View at lunchtime. So I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. At lunchtime, I meet her at the principal's office like she said. Another important thing is that I'm pretty friendly with the headmaster. She opens the door and the conversation is as follows. Ms. L, this guy was giving me an attitude during my lesson and wouldn't listen to me. I would give him a Friday after school detention, but I feel that he deserves to get a Saturday detention. Headmaster turns to me. What happened? Me. Well, my batteries for my CI died, and I raised my hand to ask if I could get the replacement batteries from my bag, but she proceeded to ignore me. Miss L. Looks like she just had an epiphany. Headmaster. Will, are you sure about this? Because he has not prior record about being disobedient? Ms. L. Looking a bit flabbergasted. Yes, I'm absolutely sure he was disrespecting me. Me? Sir, you know that I'm deaf, and that I would never on purposely do that to a teacher. Headmaster. Will, I'm inclined to believe the student here. If you have no proof otherwise, there is nothing to discuss. Miss L then goes extremely red as she realizes her mistake and storms out of the office. The headmaster gave me a slight smile before ushering me out of the office as well. Ever since then, she's never ignored me whenever I've had my hand up. Thanks for reading this. I know it was extremely long. TL. Doctor, I'm deaf and need cochlear implants. CI. To hear. Batteries in my CI go flat, and music teacher gets mad at me because I didn't do any work because I couldn't hear anything. Proceeds to embarrass herself in front of the headmaster. Edit. Wow, I didn't realize I'd get this much of a response. Thank you so much for the gold and silver, and also the general response has been largely positive. The malicious compliance was flawlessly executed. The teacher's ignorance led to her own embarrassment, while you calmly let the situation unfold. It was a perfect example of quiet resistance, where your patience and understanding exposed her mistake without confrontation.